Hey everyone, Stephen Judge, clinical naturopath and nutritionist here in Sydney, Australia. I wanted to have a conversation today around the importance of nourishing our adrenals and some key tips and strategies for you to implement today. Since our adrenals and the hormones that they produce affect all aspects of our health. And addressing adrenal impairment or exhaustion, which is a very popular term in natural medicine, it might kind of be the key that finally unlocks struggles or setbacks you're having with losing weight, kind of correcting your sleep and getting better sleep, improving your energy and feeling alive again and not feeling so bedridden and exhausted when you wake up or in the post-lunch weekday afternoon at work. I'm sure a lot of you may be able to relate to. Burnout is so common in this day and age in the modern world. I've burnt out myself before. It's not fun. You feel depleted, foggy-headed, your gut's all over the place, you're extremely moody and erratic. You might wake up during the night multiple times due to the kind of hormonal mess that's manifested. And so on a physical level, one of the key hormonal imbalances that needs to be addressed, which we can do through diet, lifestyle, and then some unique nutrient and herbal medicine prescriptions, is one of the key stress hormones, the two main ones being adrenaline and cortisol. I was lucky enough to be seeing a naturopath many years ago who helped me recover from stress and burnout using different strategies very unique to naturopathic medicine. They're so powerful. I can't think of someone who wouldn't benefit from adrenal and nervous system support in this day and age of constant busyness, and we're living in such a stimulating world, and we don't stop. We now know the link between chronic stress and so many health conditions like cardiovascular disease, to name one. And let's face it, we live in a pretty stressful world, whether it's environmental stress from the weather due to the amounts of sunlight or temperature, or noise, pollution, radiation from cell phones and Wi-Fi. We have psychological and social stress, whether that's through school or work, financial stress, emotional worry, relationship issues. And then also physiological stress. If we're nutrient deficient, that's an extra stress on the body. If we're really ill or we're going through surgery, that's a massive trauma and stress on the body. Biological aging, anyone with viruses or parasites or bacteria is incredibly stressful on the body and is going to be affecting your nervous system and your adrenals. All of these things have an influence on eliciting the body's fight or flight stress response in the body. We humans are so evolved that, unlike animals, we can invoke the stress response, not only reacting to an immediate threat that is present, such as we might be sitting an exam or running from a wild animal, but we can invoke a stress response constantly all day, just by thinking ahead into the future about something which may or may not even happen. This is so important to understand, and one of the reasons why a mindfulness and meditation practice is so therapeutic for balancing our stress hormones and reducing excess cortisol levels. So, think about how many times in the day you're thinking about the past or the future instead of just being in the present moment. And how many times, therefore, you're potentially setting off a stress response about a threat that isn't even relevant anymore and is over, or something which hasn't happened yet and may not even actually happen. Just quickly, the best way to think of the stress response on a physiological level, like what's happening and what happens when you switch it on, just think of it in the sense that the stress response it's an inbuilt mechanism that's vital for our survival. And if we're confronted with some sort of threat, for example, a gigantic bear or a leopard in the jungle that we need to flee from instantly to survive, Our brain signals this threat, and with the help of adrenaline being released from the adrenal glands, um, this immediately sugar is dumped into the bloodstream and straight to the large muscles in our body so that we can run and flee. Your heart beats faster, you're pumping more blood to the areas where it's needed. And then a few minutes later, cortisol will be released by the adrenal cortex, which this will basically shut down anything in the body that doesn't serve the immediate purpose of fleeing. So things that we require for long-term longevity, such as reproductive health and having balanced hormones so that you can conceive and have a menstrual cycle. For men, testosterone will be shut down because having a baby is not so important right now. Fighting an infection or chronic immune conditions aren't so important to fight in that very moment, so your immune function is suppressed. Breaking down food and digestion is not critical when you're trying to flee, so digestive enzymes, hydrochloric acid, gut motility is shut down. So you can see where I'm going. And in the long term, not only are our hormones and our digestion and our mood affected, but the adrenals eventually get completely worn out and become dysregulated, where the mechanism where cortisol levels in the blood should signal to the brain to stop producing them, this whole kind of negative feedback system becomes completely disrupted. And this ends up driving erratic sleep patterns and mood disturbances and extreme fatigue. This is hitting the end stage of adrenal fatigue, which usually manifests in having lower blood pressure. So, just a huge mess, basically. So it's really important to understand that we can't hone in on the adrenals in isolation and say that they've failed or they're abnormal. If you think about it, after you've been chronically activating a stress response, they're really just doing their job and responding to us perceiving stress and danger, and eventually become abnormal in their function or, exhausted, and affect the negative feedback mechanisms back to the brain. And this is where, it usually starts to wreak havoc on the body because we've disrupted that natural inbuilt physiological system that should be there for when, we really do have a threat in front of us and we do need to flee. So, we really want to balance out our stress hormones, because when you have chronically elevated cortisol levels in the body and you're dumping sugar and fatty acids into the bloodstream, which can lead to insulin resistance. And therefore, this is kind of the connection, one of the major connections between making it difficult to lose weight. And you're also reducing the ability of the thyroid gland to convert its hormones into the active forms, which influences our overall metabolism. You're suppressing the production of essential hormones, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, which is why you may have significantly reduced libido or having trouble conceiving. Long-term, you're suppressing the ability of your immune system to ward off infection. How many of us get sick after a huge bout of stress? Once we finally stop and slow down, then we're usually just hit by a truck, and that's when we get really sick. And, on a kind of larger scale, adrenal exhaustion and chronic stress, it makes us age a lot faster. And, it's well acknowledged now, the effect of chronic stress on the cardiovascular system and on heart health and on blood pressure and its ability to elevate cholesterol levels. So taking care of your adrenals and stress management leading up to enduring menopause is so important for women to understand, because when your ovaries start to shut down, this is when your adrenal glands will take over, and transitioning into menopause leaves women a lot more dramatically susceptible to conditions such as diabetes and insulin resistance and cardiovascular conditions, and therefore weight gain and exhaustion. So, having some adrenal nervous system support through perimenopause and menopause is so important for all women. So it's really important to address, and ideally we would, in terms of caring for our adrenals and our nervous system, we'd be looking at our external environment. Is it causing us to have a constant stress response and stress us out? Is it really serving us, or is it toxic to our mental and physical health? Is it draining us? But unfortunately, sometimes we can't change our environment. You may have a job you like, but it's quite demanding and very stressful, might make you quite anxious. So this is where, the use of natural therapies and herbal medicines and lifestyle techniques are there to help you cope and balance everything out. So, first off, in terms of diet, I'll just say, please do not try, if you think you are suffering from adrenal fatigue, or, you're quite exhausted, your hormones are all over the place, you're not sleeping that well, I wouldn't be going hardcore into anything like intermittent fasting, or definitely not a ketogenic diet, which I know is all the rage at the moment. It's definitely useful for a lot of people, definitely therapeutic, but they can be useful, but not if you have imbalanced adrenals and your blood sugar's all over the place, you're exhausted and you're not sleeping well, and especially if you're female, because women are just hormonally a bit more sensitive. Before even going into these kind of modified diets, first I would suggest to just get yourself grounded with a whole foods diet, having a regular eating pattern, incorporating all kinds of carbs and fats and proteins into your diet. You might need to focus on healing your gut and getting your digestion strong, and also, super importantly, getting quality sleep. I highly recommend to women to try and focus on stimulating their appetite and having a good breakfast, just to set them up for the day, because if you miss breakfast and then you're getting quite stressed and you have a coffee and then you're not that hungry, this is just going to set you up for hormonal chaos. So I highly recommend working on getting a good appetite and at least getting a good breakfast in, with a balanced intake, good quality proteins and like good fats and starchy vegetables. The key here is just to be focusing on the quality of the food to ensure that we're stabilizing our blood sugar levels. This is kind of one of the most important things. And this will also help reduce the effects of any anxiety you might be suffering. If you're unsure of what kind of foods or meals to implement here, in terms of what I'm saying about carbs, fats, and proteins, please just drop me a comment below. I'm happy to help out, get back to you, maybe email you some handouts. But, it's really just about getting back to basics. The reason, as I mentioned before, breakfast is important is because if our adrenals are imbalanced, it's going to get worse later in the day if we haven't had breakfast, typically. So, you can take a bit of herbal medicines and apple cider vinegar and stuff like that, stimulate your appetite, support your liver. They're the key things for diet. In terms of like nutrients and supplements and food as medicine, vitamin C is kind of like one of the key adrenal nutrients in nourishing your adrenals, because the adrenal glands contain more vitamin C than any other tissue in the body. It's where we predominantly store it. And every time we pump out adrenaline when we're having a stress response, we're chewing up our vitamin C. In fact, most animals make vitamin C and increase their own production of it, in response to infection and stress. But we used to be able to do that, but a genetic mutation in around 40 million years ago has now deprived us of doing this anymore. So we need to get it in our diet consistently, because it's a water-soluble vitamin and we kind of rapidly go through it. And if we're stressed, chronically stressed and fatigued, then we kind of need it even more. So, vitamin C, basically, by taking it as a supplement or in food, it reduces excess cortisol, particularly after having a stressful incident or during a period of prolonged stress, by allowing the body to quickly clear it out and reducing its destructive effects. Vitamin C is really useful. So, getting back to kind of raw fruits and veg, basically, getting in the diet. But supplementation can be useful if you're very fatigued and going through a very stressful period. The best way to take vitamin C is to have between 500 milligrams and a gram per hour between 2, 5, 6 times a day to bowel tolerance. It's quite different for everyone. There's no point having more than 1 gram within the hour because you won't absorb it and you'll just excrete it. So it's more about having the smaller doses, 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams every hour or so consistently, not kind of having a mega dose in one go. It's not going to work. So other nutrients really critical for the adrenals include like B vitamins, zinc, and magnesium. I pretty rarely see a client who doesn't need supplementation with these, especially magnesium, for at least a short period of time at least. You know, as they're so important for energy production, a hormone balance, and neurotransmitter production. The adrenal glands need them to make stress hormones. So typically if there are issues here with, you know, hormones and energy and anxiety, depression, clients very typically need some adrenal support. I reckon 99% of clients I say need some adrenal and nervous system support, which isn't really surprising. I think we all need some. You know, so dietary and lifestyle stuff are all the foundational and really important things to make sure you're incorporating and getting some personalized guidance on. You know, we know that meditation and breathing techniques are really effective at reducing excess cortisol levels and reducing the impacts of stress. And, you know, keeping us in the present moment, like I touched on before. Just thinking about the past or thinking about what might happen in the future can be chronically activating a stress response in some of us. So we've really got to kind of get a bit better and try and commit to a practice of just being mindful and going inwards. You know, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, the impact it's going to have on not only on your adrenals, but your overall health is massive. So this is something you've got to try and look at incorporating into your treatment plan in your life. Again, if you're unsure where to start there, drop me a comment. I could give you some guidance on that, send you a few handouts or tips, some of my favorite apps. But so I just finally want to touch on probably one of naturopathic medicine's most unique tools in achieving health with our clients, which is a class of herbs which are called adaptogenic herbal medicines and adrenal tonics. Adaptogenics are incredible. They're basically nourishing restorative herbs that help restore and balance and protect the body by reducing the effects of chronic stress and imbalances of stress hormones in the body. Some of these herbs are very specific for reducing excess levels in the body. Others have a more regulating and modulating effect. There are many different properties to all the different herbs that exist. So they're called adaptogens. Some of you may have heard of or have taken some in the past. Some really popular ones are rhodiola rosea, Withania somnifera, which is also known as ashwagandha, Eleutherococcus centicosus, which is Siberian ginseng, Panax ginseng, which is Korean ginseng. There's so many more, but it is important to know that they do all behave quite differently in the body, depending on the chemical constituents present. And some adaptogens are a lot more stimulating than others, which might be suitable for others and not so much for others. So there'll be particular times of the day you should and shouldn't be taking these herbs. And, you know, it's a really good idea to consult a herbalist or a naturopath so you can figure out which ones work best for you and what times of the day to take them and at what dose and in what combination. You know, for example, also some herbs not only nourish the adrenals, but one herb might also be indicated for chronic immune deficiency and night sweats. There might be another herb, an adrenal herb, that's also indicated for chronic for anxiety and insomnia, more so than other adaptogens. So, you know, herbs are really cool because they're so chemically complex. You know, for example, rhodiola rosea is an adaptogenic herb. It's quite brilliant at modulating the effects of excess cortisol in the body and a chronic stress response and fatigue. But it's also a really high antioxidant herb, and there's some pretty cool evidence out there to suggest that it's useful for reducing the formation of beta amyloid plaques in the brain. So, you know, all the herbs all have multiple actions, and depending on what's going on for you, these can then be very targeted and prescribed individually. And the synergy of particularly the liquid herbal tonics works so much better than just a tablet. Although the tablets can be useful depending on the quality of the brand, like a good practitioner brand. And yes, you know, getting a compounded adrenal and nervous system tonic, and also for sleep support, is one of the best things you can do to support your health, particularly in this modern world we're living in, especially since excess cortisol and adrenal imbalance will make it difficult for you to have sustainable weight loss and feel energized, and, you know, essentially it'll cause you to age a lot faster and will make you a lot more susceptible to suffering from things like cardiovascular disease and chronic immune deficiency. And, you know, it's in the literature quite a lot now, the effects of a chronic stress response and dysfunction of the adrenals and the negative feedback loop to the brain and its role in exacerbating anxiety and particularly depression, having excess cortisol levels, and which is kind of linked in with chronic inflammation affecting the brain and the nervous system and the gut. So, you know, although a thorough case history can usually elucidate quite well the state of your adrenals and your nervous system and what herbs you'd probably best to do on, you can get cortisol testing ordered by a naturopath, where you're basically measuring your levels 4 times throughout the day to see how and if your cortisol levels fluctuate throughout the day. As you know, they should be highest in the morning when we wake up, around 8 or 9 a.m., and they should kind of gradually become lower, and they should be lowest at nighttime. You know, but when our adrenals are not functioning optimally, the levels can become quite erratic. And so with testing, you can get really targeted with your herbal medicine and nutrient strategies and when to take them and what to take. This can be quite useful if you're dealing with kind of chronic thyroid conditions, chronic fatigue, or you're going through perimenopause or menopause. You know, the kind of where the levels of cortisol start to fluctuate quite erratically. It's just why people, I'm quite prone to this, where I can tell if I'm not taking care of myself when I'm starting to burn out a bit, if I am a bit, you know, my energy's okay in the morning and the day, and when I'm a bit tired and my, you know, focus isn't 100%, but then in the later afternoon, like, boom, I'm suddenly really stimulated, and I've got all this energy. You know, that's typically like, that shouldn't really be happening with our cortisol levels. So, you know, that's when I start to smash the adrenal herbs, and they're absolutely brilliant. And also kind of sit back and maybe inquire into why I'm getting a bit burnt out or tired. So, you know, these are all kind of really foundational things. It's also very individual. If you suffer from anxiety, this will need to be factored in, as reducing anxiety levels will reduce the constant physiological stress response that's occurring. If you're going through menopause, this will need a bit more tailored treatment. There's very specific adaptogens and adrenal tonics for going through menopause. There's basically many different drivers that can influence the development of adrenal exhaustion, which is why it's good to, you know, kind of taking random supplements and guessing, you know, maybe you'll find the right supplement and it'll help a lot, the right herb. But having a consultation is so good, because it allows you to see the context of everything that's happening in your life and why you might be burning out, and then figuring out like the best and the most targeted strategies for you to recover from adrenal exhaustion and just get you feeling good again. So thanks for listening. This is a bit of a longer video, but a huge and interesting topic. I'm confident most people can relate to in some way or form. The best thing you can do for yourself, I'll say it again, is get stress and adrenal and nervous system support. And, you know, it's something really unique that naturopaths and herbalists can offer. And, you know, and give it to yourself and allow yourself to slow down, or make yourself slow down and rejuvenate and ground yourself. Try and take a step back from the hectic lifestyle. A part of any treatment of chronic fatigue and adrenal exhaustion is cutting back your schedule and allowing yourself to convalesce. You know, many of us find it's so difficult to do. But, you know, typically we usually have to hit rock bottom before we realize, or we're forced to stop and get some support. But yeah, thanks for listening. If you have any questions, drop me a line. And yeah, have a good night. Bye.